The alarm on bed 14 screamed through the intensive care unit at 11 minutes past 2 in the morning, and Claire Doyle was already moving before the sound fully registered in her mind. Her sneakers hit the tile floor in quick, practiced steps. She did not run. Nurses who ran caused panic, and panic killed people faster than most illnesses ever could. She walked with speed, her eyes locked on the monitor above the bed, reading the numbers the way other people read a clock. The man in bed 14 had arrived 4 hours earlier with no name, no wallet, and no history. The chart taped to the foot of his bed read only, "Unknown male, approximately 40 years old." His blood pressure was dropping again, the third time that night, and each time it dropped a little further than before. "Talk to me," said Dr. Peter Hallow, jogging in from the hallway, his white coat flapping behind him. "Pressure's falling, heart rate's climbing. He's fighting something internal," Claire said, already adjusting the drip on the IV line. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. It was one of the first things people noticed about her, and one of the only things they noticed at all. Claire Doyle had worked at Lindmore General Hospital for 6 years. She was the nurse who remembered every patient's coffee order, who stayed an extra hour without complaint, who never gossiped in the break room. She was liked, but not really known. People assumed a person like that simply did not have much of a story. They were wrong, though nobody in that hospital would learn how wrong for quite some time. 2 men stood near the door of the room, arms folded, faces blank. They had arrived with the patient and had not left his side since, except to make brief phone calls in the hallway, always speaking too quietly to be overheard. They wore plain dark jackets, no hospital badges, no visitor passes. When hospital security had asked for identification earlier that night, one of the men had simply said, "We're cleared," and the head of security, after a phone call to someone far above his own authority, had backed away and left them alone. Claire had clocked all of this without saying a word to anyone. She noticed things. It was a habit that ran deeper than her nursing training, though she could not have explained why, even to herself. Not anymore. "We need to open him up if this bleeding doesn't stop," Dr. Hallow said, checking the monitor again. "Get the operating room ready." "Already called it in," Claire answered. She glanced toward the man in the bed, at the faint white line of an old scar running along his collarbone, mostly hidden beneath the hospital gown. It was not the kind of scar a person got from a car accident or a fall down the stairs. She had seen scars like that before, a long time ago, in a different life, one she had worked very hard to leave behind. The heart monitor beeped twice, quickened, then steadied again. The immediate danger passed, at least for now. Dr. Hallow exhaled and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Good work," he said to Claire. "You caught that fast." "Just doing my job," she said, and turned to check the IV line again, avoiding his eyes. It was not just her job. It had never been just her job. But no one here needed to know that. At the nurses' station down the hall, Nora Bishop was pouring herself a cup of burnt coffee and watching the small television mounted near the ceiling. The volume turned low so it would not disturb the patients. She caught sight of Claire walking past, her scrubs slightly wrinkled, her ponytail coming loose. "Rough one tonight?" Nora asked. "He's stable for now," Claire said. "Barely." "Any idea who he is?" Claire shook her head, though that was not entirely true. She did not know his name, but something about the shape of his jaw, the calm stillness in his face even while unconscious, tugged at a memory she had spent years trying to bury under new routines, new friendships, a new and quieter version of herself. "Those 2 guys are still standing outside his room," Nora whispered, leaning closer. "They haven't eaten, haven't used the bathroom, haven't blinked, I swear. It's creepy." "They're probably just doing their job too," Claire said, though her own pulse had ticked up slightly at the mention of them. She had seen men like that before, quiet, watchful, trained to disappear into a background while missing nothing. The kind of men who did not carry hospital visitor badges because the organizations they worked for did not print badges at all. Claire finished her rounds an hour later and slipped into the small break room to eat a sandwich she had packed the night before, back when her biggest concern had been whether she had enough milk left for her morning coffee. Now, sitting alone under the flickering fluorescent light, she found her hands were not quite as steady as they had been in the patient's room. She set the sandwich down untouched. She had chosen nursing 7 years ago because it required exactness, calm under pressure, and total anonymity. 3 things she had needed badly at the time. Nobody at Linmore General knew that before she wore scrubs, she had worn a very different kind of uniform. Nobody knew about the years she had spent overseas, doing work that never appeared in any newspaper, work that had required her to disappear so completely that even her own family had lost track of her for a while. Nursing had been her way out, a door she had shut firmly behind her, or so she had believed. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from an unknown number. Is it him? Claire stared at the screen. No name, no explanation. Just those 3 words glowing in the dim light of the break room. Her stomach tightened. She typed back a single question mark and pressed send, but no reply came. She waited 2 full minutes, staring at the phone, before finally sliding it into her pocket and standing up. Whoever had sent that message knew she was working tonight. They knew about the patient in bed 14, and they believed she would know exactly who him meant. She walked back down the hallway toward the ICU, her mind racing even as her face remained perfectly calm, the same calm expression she always wore, the one that made people assume nothing ever rattled her. The 2 silent men were still positioned outside room 14, unmoving, when she passed. One of them, the taller one with short gray hair and pale eyes, glanced at her name tag as she walked by. It was quick, barely noticeable, but Claire caught it. He was reading her name, committing it to memory. She kept walking, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her hesitate. Inside the room, the patient's vital signs had stabilized further, though he remained unconscious. Claire checked his chart again, then, almost without thinking, reached out and gently lifted the edge of the bandage near his shoulder, just enough to see the tattoo beneath it, a small circle with 3 lines crossing through the center. She let the bandage fall back into place immediately, her heart pounding harder than it had all night. She knew that mark. She had seen it exactly once before, a very long time ago, stitched into the collar of a jacket belonging to someone she had trusted completely, someone who had vanished from her life without warning, without explanation, leaving behind only questions she had never been able to answer. Was this him? After all these years? Claire stepped back from the bed, her breathing controlled but her thoughts anything but. She glanced toward the door, at the silent men who watched everything and said nothing, and understood, with sudden and complete clarity, that her carefully rebuilt life had just cracked wide open. Whatever was coming next, it was already too late to stop it. Down the corridor, past the nurse's station, past the waiting room where a single exhausted father dozed in a plastic chair beside a vending machine, the automatic doors leading to the hospital's ambulance bay slid open with a soft mechanical hiss. Nobody walked through them, not yet, but somewhere above the building, faint and distant, a new sound had begun to grow, a low, steady beat that most people would have mistaken for distant thunder. Claire heard it too, and unlike everyone else in the hospital that night, she knew exactly what it was. The sound grew louder, and now other people in the hospital began to notice it too. A janitor mopping the lobby floor paused and looked up at the ceiling. A security guard near the front desk lowered his newspaper and frowned. The steady beat of rotor blades was unmistakable now, cutting through the quiet of the early morning, like a drum growing closer with every second. Claire stood at the edge of the ICU corridor, her sandwich forgotten, her mind working through possibilities faster than she wanted it to. A helicopter arriving at a small regional hospital in the middle of the night was not unheard of. Sometimes trauma patients arrived that way, flown in from accidents too far from a proper trauma center. But this was different. There had been no call from dispatch, no warning from the flight crew, no announcement over the hospital's speaker system preparing the rooftop pad for landing, and the sound was not coming from the direction of the highway, where most accidents happened. It was coming from directly above the building, and it was descending. She walked quickly toward the elevator bank near the east wing, the one that led up to the small rooftop helipad rarely used except for emergency transfers. Dr. Hallow caught sight of her and jogged to catch up. "Do you know something about this?" he asked, glancing upward as the windows began to rattle faintly with the vibration of the approaching aircraft. "No," Claire said, which was almost true. She did not know what was happening, but she had a very strong suspicion about why it was happening, and that suspicion had a name she had not spoken aloud in years. The elevator doors opened, and Claire stepped inside before Dr. Hallow could ask another question. He hesitated, then followed her in, pressing the button for the roof access floor. "If there's an incoming trauma patient, we need to be ready," he said, more to himself than to her, already reaching for the radio clipped to his belt to alert the rest of the surgical team. Claire said nothing. She kept her eyes on the numbers ticking upward above the elevator door, her jaw tight, her thoughts circling back again and again to the tattoo she had seen beneath the bandage on the unconscious man's shoulder. A circle, 3 lines, a symbol that belonged to an organization so quiet, so deliberately hidden, that most people who had heard its name assumed it was nothing more than a rumor traded between conspiracy theorists and retired intelligence officers. She had once belonged to that world herself. The elevator doors slid open onto a narrow hallway that led to a heavy metal door marked Roof Access, authorized personnel only. Claire pushed through it first, the cold night air hitting her face as she stepped outside. Above her, a black helicopter, sleek and unmarked, without a single visible logo or registration number, was already beginning its descent toward the painted circle on the rooftop pad. Its lights were dimmed, almost invisible except for a faint red glow along its underside, the kind of lighting used by aircraft that preferred not to be noticed from the ground. Dr. Hallow stepped out behind her, immediately raising a hand to shield his eyes from the wind kicked up by the rotors. "That's not a medical transport helicopter," he shouted over the noise. "There's no markings, no call sign. This isn't protocol." "No," Claire agreed quietly, though her voice was lost beneath the roar. "It isn't." The helicopter touched down with practiced precision, the skids settling onto the pad without so much as a bounce. The rotors continued spinning, slower now, as the side door slid open, and 2 figures stepped out, moving low and fast beneath the blades exactly the way people who had been trained to do so always moved. They were dressed similarly to the 2 men who had been standing outside room 14 all night. Dark jackets, no visible insignia, faces set in the same practiced blankness. One of them, a woman with short dark hair and sharp eyes that swept the rooftop in a single efficient motion, spotted Claire immediately and walked directly toward her, ignoring Dr. Hallow entirely. "Claire Doyle," the woman said. It was not a question. Claire felt her stomach drop, but her face remained perfectly still. "Who's asking?" "You know who's asking," the woman replied. "We need to speak with you about the patient in room 14. Dr. Hallow stepped forward, his doctor's instinct to protect his patient and his staff, overriding whatever caution he might otherwise have felt. "Excuse me, but you can't just land on our roof in the middle of the night and start making demands. This is a hospital. We have rules here, procedures, patient privacy laws." The woman glanced at him, not unkindly, but with the patient look of someone who had heard this exact objection many times before and had long ago stopped finding it interesting. "Doctor, I understand your concerns, and I respect them, but the man in that bed is connected to matters of national importance, and time is not something we have a great deal of tonight." "National importance," Dr. Hallow repeated, glancing at Claire as though hoping she might explain, or perhaps contradict the woman entirely. Claire offered him nothing, her expression carefully neutral, though inside her thoughts were racing through a dozen different possibilities, none of them comfortable. "I need 5 minutes with Ms. Doyle," the woman said. "Alone." "That's not going to happen," Dr. Hallow said firmly. "Whatever this is about, if it involves my staff, I'm staying." The woman studied him for a long moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as though deciding he was not worth the argument. "Fine, both of you then, but we need to move quickly." She led them back toward the roof access door, the second figure from the helicopter falling into step a few paces behind, watchful, silent, scanning the rooftop and the surrounding buildings with the kind of practiced awareness that came only from years of training in environments where a moment of carelessness could cost someone their life. Back inside the stairwell, away from the wind and noise of the rotors, the woman finally introduced herself. "My name is Agent Priya Kessler. I work for an agency that does not appear on any government organizational chart you have ever seen, and I would prefer to keep it that way. The man currently unconscious in your ICU is a former operative named Daniel Ashworth. He went missing 11 years ago during an operation that, officially, never happened." Claire's breath caught, though she forced herself to keep her expression steady. Daniel Ashworth. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in over a decade. Not since the night he had disappeared from a rendezvous point in a country she had sworn never to name again, leaving her to explain his absence to superiors who had not believed a single word of her account. "You knew him," Kessler said, watching Claire's face carefully. "I can see it. You don't have to pretend otherwise. We already know your history, Ms. Doyle. Or should I say, Agent Doyle. We've known where you've been for years. We simply had no reason to disturb the life you built here until tonight." Dr. Hallow's mouth opened slightly, his eyes moving from Kessler to Claire and back again, clearly struggling to reconcile the quiet, unassuming nurse he had worked alongside for years with whatever Kessler was describing. "Claire," he said slowly, "what is she talking about?" Claire closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, her voice quiet but steady. "It's a long story, Peter. Longer than we have time for right now," Kessler continued, undeterred by the doctor's confusion. "Ashworth was carrying information when he disappeared, information that several very dangerous people have spent 11 years trying to recover. 2 nights ago, he resurfaced under circumstances we are still piecing together, badly injured, and was brought to the nearest hospital, which happened to be yours. We believe the people responsible for his condition are already aware of his location. That is why we are here, and that is why we need him moved somewhere secure, immediately, before they arrive to finish what they started." "Finish what?" Dr. Hallow asked, though the tightness in his voice suggested he already suspected the answer, and did not want to hear it confirmed. "Ensure he never wakes up to tell anyone what he knows," Kessler said simply. The stairwell fell silent, except for the fading thrum of the helicopter's rotors, slowing outside. Claire felt the weight of the last decade pressing down on her all at once, every quiet shift she had worked, every ordinary conversation she had shared with colleagues who knew nothing about her past, all of it suddenly feeling impossibly fragile, like a carefully built structure now trembling in a wind she had never expected to feel again. "I left that life behind," Claire said quietly. "I made a choice a long time ago to walk away from it completely." "We know," Kessler said, and for the first time, something almost gentle entered her voice. "And under any other circumstances, we would have respected that choice for the rest of your life. But Daniel Ashworth trusted exactly one person enough to keep a secret that could still get both of you killed, and unfortunately for you, that person was you. He mentioned your name before he lost consciousness in the field. That is the only reason we tracked you here so quickly. Whoever is hunting him will likely reach the same conclusion soon, if they have not already." Claire's mind flashed back to the text message she had received in the break room less than an hour earlier. Is it him? Someone else, apparently, had already begun asking the same question Kessler was now answering for her, and that person had not identified themselves as a friend. "There's something else," Claire said slowly. "I got a message tonight, right before the helicopter arrived. Someone already knew he was here. Someone already suspected I would know who he was." Kessler's expression sharpened instantly, all traces of gentleness disappearing. "Show me." Claire pulled out her phone and handed it over. Kessler studied the message for a long moment, then handed it to the second agent standing quietly behind her, who immediately began typing something into a small device pulled from his jacket pocket. "This changes things," Kessler said. "If they already know you're connected to him, they may already be moving toward this hospital. We need to relocate the patient now, and we need you to come with us, Agent Doyle, willingly, if possible." "And if I refuse?" Claire asked, though she already suspected she would not. "Then Daniel Ashworth likely dies in that bed tonight, along with anyone unfortunate enough to be standing nearby when the people hunting him arrive to make certain of it," Kessler said bluntly. "I'm not going to pretend this is a simple choice, but I don't think you're the kind of person who walks away from someone who once trusted you with his life, no matter how many years have passed." Dr. Hallow, who had been silent for the past several moments, finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Claire, whatever you decide, I need to know if my hospital, my staff, my patients, are in danger tonight." Claire looked at him, at the genuine concern etched across his tired face, and felt a fresh wave of guilt settle over her. Peter Hallow had trusted her completely for 6 years, had never once questioned her quiet efficiency or her closed-off past, and now, because of a life she had never told him about, that trust was about to cost him a peaceful night's sleep, if nothing worse. "Yes," she admitted. "If they're already coming, everyone here could be in danger. We need to move fast, and we need to move quietly." Kessler nodded, already turning back toward the stairwell door. Then let's not waste any more time talking about it. Doctor, I need your medical team to prepare Ashworth for immediate transport. Minimal information given to anyone not directly involved. And Agent Doyle, I need you suited up and ready to move in the next 10 minutes. Whatever life you built here, it's about to collide very directly with the one you left behind, whether either of us likes it or not. Claire took a steadying breath, feeling the familiar cold clarity of old training settling back over her mind, like a coat she had not worn in years but somehow still remembered exactly how to put on. Somewhere below them, in a room she had walked past 100 times without incident, a man from her past lay unconscious, unaware that the woman who had once trusted him with everything was now the only person standing between him and whoever intended to make certain he never woke up again. The quiet nurse nobody had ever truly noticed was about to become someone entirely different, right in front of the very people who thought they knew her best. 10 minutes was not much time to say goodbye to a life, but Claire had once been trained to do far more difficult things in far less time than that. She moved quickly down the stairwell, Kessler beside her, the second agent already several steps ahead, speaking rapidly into a small radio clipped inside his jacket. Nora spotted her crossing the ICU floor and hurried over, her face pale with worry. Claire, what is going on? Security is saying we're on some kind of lockdown. Nobody in, nobody out. There are people in tactical gear near the emergency entrance now. Actual tactical gear. Claire. I need you to trust me, Claire said, gripping her friend's arm gently. Get the other patients moved away from the east wing if you can. Quietly. No panic. Just tell them it's a precaution. Can you do that? Nora searched her face, clearly wanting to ask 100 questions, but reading something in Claire's expression that told her this was not the moment for any of them. Okay, she said simply. Okay. I trust you. Just come back. All right? Whatever this is, come back. Claire squeezed her hand once and moved on, following Kessler toward room 14, where the medical team was already carefully transferring Daniel Ashworth from his hospital bed onto a portable transport gurney, IV lines and monitoring equipment moving with him in a smooth, practice sequence that spoke to years of emergency training. Dr. Hallow supervised the transfer himself, his earlier shock replaced now by the calm focus of a man doing his job under pressure, even a job he had never expected to face. His vitals are stable enough for transport, but barely, he told Kessler. If you move him too roughly, you could reopen the internal bleeding we worked so hard to control tonight. Understood, Kessler said. We have a trauma surgeon waiting at the secure facility. He'll be in capable hands the moment we land. He's in capable hands right now, Dr. Hallow said pointedly, though there was no real argument left in his voice, only tired resignation. Claire looked down at Daniel Ashworth's face for the first time since she had lifted the edge of his bandage hours earlier. 11 years had changed him. There were lines near his eyes that had not been there before, a hardness to his jaw that suggested years spent somewhere far harder than the quiet town she had settled into. But underneath it all, she could still see traces of the man she had once known, the one who had pulled her out of danger more than once, who had made impossible situations feel briefly survivable, with nothing more than a calm joke and steady hands. Stay with me a little longer, she murmured to him quietly, though he could not hear her. Just a little longer. The transport moved swiftly through the corridor, Kessler and the second agent flanking the gurney, while Claire walked close behind, her mind already shifting into the sharp, focused state she remembered from years ago, a state she had almost forgotten she was capable of reaching. Around them, hospital staff pressed themselves against the walls, watching with wide eyes as the strange procession passed, unmarked agents and unfamiliar equipment moving through halls that had never seen anything like this before. They reached the elevator bank and began the ascent back toward the rooftop, but halfway up, the second agent's radio crackled sharply, and his expression shifted from calm focus to something far more urgent. We've got a problem, he said, holding the radio close to his ear. 2 vehicles just pulled into the hospital's east parking structure. No hospital markings, moving fast, 4 occupants each. Security cameras caught partial faces. Facial recognition is running now, but based on movement pattern alone, this isn't a coincidence. Kessler's jaw tightened. They found him faster than we expected. How? Claire asked, though even as she said it, An uncomfortable thought was already forming in her mind. The message. Whoever sent that text to me, they didn't just suspect he was here. They already knew, and they knew fast enough to have people mobilized within the hour. That's not luck. That's a source. Someone inside. Kessler's eyes flicked toward her, sharp and assessing. You think someone inside this hospital tipped them off? I think someone close to this operation did, Claire said carefully. Maybe not inside the hospital. Maybe inside your own people. The elevator doors opened onto the rooftop level, and the group moved quickly through the access door into the cold night air, the helicopter's rotors already spinning back up to full speed in preparation for departure. But before they had crossed half the distance to the aircraft, the stairwell door behind them burst open, and 3 men in dark clothing emerged onto the rooftop, moving with the same trained precision Claire recognized instantly from her own past. Down, Kessler shouted, pulling Claire sideways behind a rooftop maintenance unit, as the second agent spun toward the newcomers, his hand moving to his jacket. What followed was not the kind of chaotic, careless confrontation seen in movies. It was fast, controlled, and over in a matter of seconds. The second agent moved with practiced efficiency, using the maintenance unit for cover while directing sharp, precise instructions toward the helicopter crew, who immediately began adjusting their position for a faster departure. One of the 3 intruders attempted to close the distance toward the gurney where Daniel Ashworth lay, but Claire, moving on instinct honed by years of training she had never fully lost, intercepted him before he could get close, using controlled, non-lethal technique to disable him and secure his hands before he even fully registered what had happened. Dr. Hallow, crouched behind a rooftop railing with 2 of the medical transport team, stared at Claire in complete astonishment, his understanding of the quiet, unassuming nurse he had worked beside for 6 years, shattering completely in the span of a few adrenaline-filled seconds. "They're falling back," Kessler called out, watching as the remaining 2 intruders retreated toward the stairwell door, clearly recognizing that their attempt at a rooftop intercept had failed and that continuing the confrontation risked exposing far more of their operation than they were willing to lose. "Get him loaded, now, before they regroup and try again from a different angle." The medical team moved quickly, securing Daniel Ashworth's gurney into the helicopter's interior, while Dr. Hallow climbed aboard to continue monitoring his vitals during the flight, unwilling to abandon his patient despite the danger, a decision that spoke to exactly the kind of doctor he had always been. Claire helped secure the restrained intruder to a rooftop support beam for hospital security to handle, once the helicopter departed, then turned to find Kessler watching her with an expression that mixed relief with something like renewed respect. "You haven't lost a step," Kessler said. 11 years, and you haven't lost a step." "I had hoped I had," Claire said quietly, glancing down at her hands, steady as always, though her heart was pounding harder than it had in years. "I built a life around the hope that I'd never need any of this again." "Sometimes the past doesn't care what we hoped for," Kessler said, not unkindly. "Come on, we need to get airborne before the rest of their team regroups and tries something bigger." Claire climbed aboard the helicopter, taking a seat near Daniel Ashworth's gurney, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest as Dr. Hallow adjusted his IV line with careful, practiced hands. Below them, the rooftop of Linmore General Hospital fell away as the aircraft lifted into the dark morning sky, the lights of the small town spreading out beneath them, ordinary and unaware of everything that had just unfolded above their heads. "Where are we taking him?" Dr. Hallow asked, raising his voice slightly over the noise of the rotors. "A secure medical facility 2 hours from here," Kessler answered. "Fully equipped, fully protected, and completely off any public record. You'll both be safe there, and so will he." "Both of us?" Dr. Hallow repeated, glancing toward Claire. "You've seen too much to simply go back to your ordinary shift tomorrow morning, Doctor," Kessler said gently. "For your own safety, and for the safety of your hospital staff, we need to keep you somewhere secure until we're certain the threat has been contained. I'm sorry for the disruption to your life. This isn't how any of us wanted tonight to unfold." Dr. Hallow was quiet for a long moment, watching his unconscious patient's steady heartbeat trace across the small portable monitor beside the gurney. "Just tell me one thing," he finally said, looking at Claire. "The woman I've worked beside for 6 years, the one who never talks about her past, who always seems so calm no matter what happens in that hospital. Was any of that real?" Claire met his eyes steadily. All of it was real, Peter. The nursing, the care I have for my patients, the person you've known for 6 years, that's who I chose to become. This, she gestured faintly toward the unconscious man on the gurney, toward the armed agents seated near the helicopter's open door. This is who I used to be, a long time ago, before I decided I wanted something different. And now? Dr. Hallow asked quietly. Claire looked down at Daniel Ashworth's still face, remembering every moment they had shared before his disappearance, every unanswered question that had haunted her for 11 long years. Now I think both versions of me might need to work together, at least for tonight. The helicopter continued its steady flight through the darkness, carrying its passengers away from the ordinary world of Linmore General Hospital and toward whatever answers waited for them at their destination. Behind them, in the hospital's parking structure, hospital security and the small team of unmarked agents left behind continued questioning the 2 intruders who had been apprehended, gathering information that would soon reveal just how deep this particular danger truly ran, and how many more people might still be searching for Daniel Ashworth and the secret he had carried through 11 years of silence. Claire closed her eyes briefly, feeling the vibration of the rotors through the metal frame of her seat, and allowed herself, just for a moment, to remember the last time she had sat beside Daniel Ashworth like this, years ago, in a helicopter very much like this one, flying away from danger, toward an uncertain future neither of them could have predicted. Back then, she had believed that flight marked the end of a chapter in her life. Now it seemed, that chapter had never truly closed at all. It had simply been waiting, quietly, for the right moment to begin again. Beside her, Daniel Ashworth's fingers twitched faintly against the gurney's restraint straps, the first small sign of consciousness beginning to stir beneath the surface of his injuries. Claire noticed it immediately, leaning forward, watching closely as his eyelids fluttered once, then stilled again. Whatever answers he carried, whatever secret had cost him 11 years of his life, and nearly cost him tonight as well, they were getting closer to the truth with every passing minute. And Claire, despite every quiet, ordinary day she had spent building a new life, far from all of this, found herself feeling something she had not expected to feel again after all these years. She felt ready. The secure facility appeared beneath them nearly 2 hours later, a low cluster of buildings surrounded by dense forest, invisible from any nearby road, and unmarked on any map Claire had ever seen. The helicopter descended smoothly onto a private landing pad lit by soft blue runway lights, and within minutes, Daniel Ashworth was being wheeled into a fully equipped medical wing, staffed by a small team, who moved with the same quiet efficiency Claire remembered from her own years in this world. Dr. Hallow followed closely, providing a rapid handoff briefing to the waiting trauma surgeon, his professional focus clearly helping him manage the surreal strangeness of the night. Claire watched him go, grateful that despite everything, his medical instincts had carried him through, keeping Daniel Ashworth stable during a flight that could easily have ended very differently. "He'll be in surgery within the hour," Kessler said, appearing at Claire's side as the medical team disappeared through a set of heavy double doors. "The surgeon here has handled far more complicated cases than this. He'll be fine." "And after the surgery?" Claire asked. "When he wakes up, what happens then?" "That depends on what he remembers, and what he's willing to tell us," Kessler said. "But first, I think it's time you and I had a longer conversation, don't you? There are things about tonight I haven't told you yet, things I think you deserve to know before this goes any further." She led Claire down a quiet hallway to a small private office, closing the door behind them before gesturing toward a chair. Claire sat, though every instinct honed over years of training told her to remain standing, alert, ready to move. Old habits, apparently, did not fade nearly as much as she had believed. 11 years ago, Kessler began, settling into the chair across from her. Daniel Ashworth was part of a small team investigating a private network, suspected of selling classified information to the highest bidder, regardless of which country or organization was doing the bidding. The team believed they had identified the person responsible for leaking that information. They were wrong. Or rather, they were only partially right. "What do you mean?" Claire asked. "The person they identified was a mid-level courier, someone passing information along, not the actual source," Kessler said. "The real source was someone far higher up, someone with access to operations across multiple agencies, Someone trusted enough that nobody thought to look closely at them until it was far too late. Daniel figured this out 3 days before he disappeared. We believe he confronted the real source directly, without backup, without informing anyone else on the team, likely because he wasn't certain who else might be compromised. Claire's chest tightened. You're saying he went after this person alone? We believe so. Yes, Kessler said. And we believe that confrontation is why he vanished for 11 years. Not because he failed, Claire. Because he succeeded in uncovering something so dangerous that the only way to survive was to disappear completely, taking whatever proof he had gathered with him. Then why resurface now? Claire asked. Why come back after 11 years of hiding? Kessler hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. Because 2 weeks ago, the person we believe Daniel identified all those years ago was quietly promoted to a position with access to information that could compromise operations far beyond anything from a decade ago. We think Daniel found out. We think he decided the risk of staying hidden any longer outweighed the risk of coming forward, even if coming forward meant walking straight back into danger. Claire absorbed this slowly, pieces of the last several hours rearranging themselves into a clearer, more troubling picture. And you think this same person, whoever they are, is the one who sent people to that hospital tonight? I think it's very likely, yes, Kessler said, which means the danger isn't over, simply because we've moved him to a secure facility. If this person has the kind of access we suspect, secure facilities may not remain secure for very long. A knock interrupted them, and the second agent from earlier stepped inside, his expression tense. Agent Kessler, we have a situation. One of the intruders apprehended at the hospital has been identified. His employment records trace back through 3 shell companies, but the final thread connects to an internal security contractor with active clearance inside this very network. Kessler stood immediately. Someone inside our own infrastructure. It looks that way, the agent confirmed. Which means, whoever ordered tonight's operation may already know Ashworth was brought here. Claire felt a cold certainty settle over her. Then we don't have much time before they try again. No, Kessler agreed grimly. We don't. They moved quickly back toward the medical wing, where Dr. Hallow met them at the door, his face pale but composed. He's stable. Surgery went well. Better than expected, honestly. He should regain consciousness within the next hour or 2. We may not have that long, Kessler said. I need this facility placed on full lockdown immediately, and I need a secondary transport option prepared in case we need to move him again on short notice. Dr. Hallow's eyes widened slightly. Move him again? He just came out of surgery. Moving him again could be extremely dangerous. Leaving him here could be worse, Kessler said. I'm sorry, doctor, but I need you to trust me on this. Claire stepped closer to the recovery room window, watching Daniel Ashworth's chest rise and fall steadily beneath the soft glow of the monitoring equipment. 11 years of silence, of hiding, of carrying a secret dangerous enough to threaten his life, and now, finally close to safety, that same danger was closing in once more, this time from within the very organization meant to protect him. I want to be there when he wakes up, Claire said quietly. If anyone tries anything before then, I want to be close enough to stop it. Kessler studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but if this facility comes under threat before he wakes, we move immediately. No hesitation, no matter what. The hours that followed passed with a tense, watchful quiet, the kind Claire remembered vividly from her years in the field, the waiting that always felt heavier than the action itself. She sat beside Daniel Ashworth's bed, monitoring his vitals alongside the medical staff, her mind replaying old memories she had spent over a decade trying to set aside. The two of them, years ago, running through unfamiliar streets under cover of darkness, the steady sound of his voice keeping her calm during moments when panic would have gotten them both killed. The morning she had woken to find him gone, no note, no explanation, only silence that had stretched into 11 long years. Just after 4 in the morning, Daniel's eyes finally began to flutter open. Claire leaned forward immediately, keeping her voice low and steady. Daniel, can you hear me? His eyes opened fully, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they settled on her face. For a long moment, he simply stared, as though uncertain whether she was truly there, or merely a product of whatever medication still lingered in his system. Claire, he finally rasped, his voice rough from disuse. You're really here. I'm here, she confirmed, gently squeezing his hand. You're safe. You're in a secure medical facility. You've been unconscious for several hours, but the surgery went well. Daniel's eyes drifted briefly around the room, taking in the monitoring equipment, the closed door, the faint outline of an armed agent visible through the small window. How long? He asked quietly. 11 years, Daniel, Claire said softly. You disappeared 11 years ago, and now, tonight, you show up in my hospital, half unconscious, with people hunting you, before you've even had the chance to wake up and explain any of it. His face tightened with something that looked like guilt. I'm sorry. I know I owe you an explanation. I owe you more than that, honestly. But right now, we don't have much time. There are things you need to know. Kessler already told me some of it, Claire said. About the courier. About the real source you uncovered 11 years ago. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. She told you that much? She told me enough to understand why you disappeared, Claire said, but not enough to know exactly who we're dealing with, or how close they might already be. Daniel struggled to sit up slightly, wincing at the effort, and Claire gently pressed a hand against his shoulder, urging him back down. Don't. You just came out of surgery. Whatever you need to tell me, you can tell me lying down. He nodded, breathing carefully through the pain, then began speaking in a low, urgent voice. The person I identified 11 years ago wasn't just passing information for money. They were building something far larger, a network capable of accessing operations across multiple countries, multiple agencies, all while remaining completely undetected. I found proof, real proof, documents, recordings, enough to end their career and expose the entire network. But before I could bring it forward safely, they found out I knew. I had to disappear, and I had to hide everything I'd found somewhere they would never think to look. Where? Claire asked. Daniel's eyes met hers, steady despite his exhaustion. Somewhere only you would understand, Claire. I hid it in the one place from our past that I knew you would eventually recognize, if you ever needed to find it. I just never expected it would take 11 years, or that you would end up right back in the middle of all of this because of me. Before Claire could respond, the door burst open, and the second agent rushed inside, his face tight with urgency. Agent Kessler needs you both immediately. We've lost contact with 2 perimeter checkpoints in the last 90 seconds. Whoever's coming for him, they're already inside the outer fence line. Claire's training snapped instantly back into place, every ounce of hesitation disappearing as she rose to her feet, positioning herself protectively near Daniel's bed. How much time do we have? Not enough, the agent said grimly. We need to move him now. Daniel gripped Claire's hand tightly, his voice urgent despite his weakened state. Claire, listen to me. If anything happens to me before I can explain the rest, you need to know where I hid everything. You need to remember. Nothing is going to happen to you, Claire said firmly, already helping the medical team prepare him for emergency transport despite the surgeon's concerned protests. Not while I'm still standing here. I already lost you once without an explanation. I'm not losing you again without one either. Outside the recovery room, the sound of raised voices and hurried footsteps echoed through the facility's hallways, the quiet efficiency of earlier, now replaced by the controlled urgency of a security breach in progress. Kessler's voice carried sharply over a nearby radio, directing her team toward the compromised checkpoints, while simultaneously ordering the medical wing prepared for immediate evacuation. Claire looked down at Daniel's pale but determined face, at the fear and resolve mixing together in his tired eyes, and felt the last remaining traces of her ordinary, quiet nursing life fall completely away, replaced entirely by the sharp, focused clarity of the person she had once been. The person, it seemed, she had never truly stopped being underneath it all. Whatever was coming through that outer fence line, whoever had been patient enough to wait 11 years for the right moment to finish what they had started, they were about to discover that Daniel Ashworth was no longer alone, and neither, for that matter, was Claire Doyle. The lights along the facility's main corridor dimmed briefly, then flickered back to full brightness as the backup power system engaged, a clear sign that the outer perimeter's security systems had already been tampered with. Kessler appeared at the recovery room door, her expression hard and focused. We're moving him to the secondary transport now, east corridor, then straight to the underground garage. Doctor, I need you and your patient ready to move in the next 60 seconds. Dr. Hallow, despite his exhaustion, nodded firmly. already helping the medical team disconnect Daniel from the stationary monitoring equipment and transfer his readings to a portable unit that could travel with him. He's stable enough for a short move, but nothing rough. Understood? Understood, Kessler said, then turned to Claire. I need you close to him the entire way. If our inside source is as deeply embedded as we suspect, I don't know who else on this security team I can fully trust right now. Claire nodded, positioning herself beside Daniel's gurney as the team began moving quickly down the east corridor, Kessler and the second agent flanking them closely, weapons drawn but held low, eyes scanning every doorway and side hall they passed. The facility, usually so quiet and controlled, now felt charged with tension, every shadow suddenly significant, every distant sound a potential threat. They reached the underground garage without incident, a low concrete space lined with several unmarked vehicles, engines already running, drivers waiting with the same watchful stillness Claire remembered so well from her years in this world. Daniel was loaded carefully into the back of an armored transport van, Dr. Hallow climbing in beside him to continue monitoring his condition, while Claire moved to climb in after them. Wait, Kessler said, catching her arm gently. I need you in the lead vehicle with me. If our inside source anticipated this exact transport route, I want someone with field experience beside me, who can help identify a problem before it becomes one. Claire hesitated, glancing back toward Daniel, who caught her eye through the van's open door and gave her a small, tired nod, silently telling her to go, that he trusted her judgment completely, even now, even after everything. Keep him safe, Claire said to Dr. Hallow. With everything I have, Dr. Hallow promised. The convoy pulled out of the underground garage moments later, moving swiftly along a narrow service road that wound through the dense forest surrounding the facility, headlights off, relying instead on low-intensity infrared systems designed to keep the vehicles nearly invisible in the darkness. Claire sat in the front passenger seat of the lead vehicle, Kessler driving beside her, both women scanning the tree line with sharp, practiced focus. Talk to me about the source, Claire said, keeping her voice low. If they're inside your organization, they'll know standard evacuation protocols. They'll know the likely routes we'd choose. Which is exactly why we're taking an unlisted route, Kessler said. One I only finalized 10 minutes ago, shared with nobody outside this vehicle, and the transport van directly behind us. That's not enough, Claire said, her mind working quickly through old patterns of thought she had not used in years, but which returned to her now with startling clarity. If they anticipated we'd suspect an inside leak, they wouldn't rely on route information alone. They'd position assets along every plausible corridor leading away from the facility, waiting for whichever one we actually choose. Kessler's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. You think we're driving into a trap regardless of which route we take. I think whoever planned tonight's operation has had 11 years to prepare for this exact moment, Claire said. I don't think they're relying on a single point of failure. As if in confirmation of her words, the radio mounted on the dashboard crackled sharply, and the second agent's voice, tense and urgent, cut through the static. We've got a vehicle blocking the service road half a mile ahead. No lights, engine running. This isn't a coincidence. Kessler swore quietly under her breath, and immediately began slowing the vehicle, signaling for the transport van behind them to do the same. Options, she said sharply, glancing at Claire. Claire's mind raced through the terrain she had glimpsed briefly on the drive-in, the layout of the forest, the narrow service roads branching off toward the facility's rear boundary. There's a secondary access path near the old maintenance gate, about 200 yards back. It's narrow, probably not built for a vehicle this size, but it would let us bypass whatever's waiting on the main road. How do you know about a maintenance gate you've never seen before tonight? Kessler asked, even as she began reversing the vehicle carefully. I don't. Not exactly, Claire admitted. But every facility built for this kind of secrecy has a secondary access point that isn't listed on the primary security schematics. It's standard design. I'd bet good money it's there. Kessler didn't argue further, trusting the instinct of someone who had clearly done this kind of work long before either of them had ever set foot in that hospital. She radioed the transport van, redirecting them toward the maintenance path Claire had described, and within minutes, the convoy was winding along a narrow, overgrown trail, barely wide enough for the vehicles, branches scraping against the sides as they pushed forward through the darkness. They emerged onto a quiet stretch of road nearly a mile from where the blockade had been positioned, the facility's perimeter fence visible again in the distance behind them, still and undisturbed. For a moment, it seemed as though they had successfully slipped past the trap entirely. Then headlights appeared suddenly from a side road ahead, swinging directly into their path, and Kessler was forced to brake hard, the vehicle skidding slightly before coming to a stop. Claire's hand moved instinctively toward the door, every muscle in her body tensing, ready to move the moment it became necessary. A single figure stepped out from behind the blocking vehicle, walking slowly into the glow of the headlights, hands visible and empty, deliberately unthreatening. It was a man Claire did not recognize. Older, silver-haired, dressed in a plain gray coat that gave no indication of rank or affiliation. "Agent Kessler," the man called out calmly. "I believe you already suspect who I am, given how carefully you tried to avoid this exact road." Kessler's expression hardened into something cold and controlled. "Director Whitfield, I confess, I was hoping I was wrong." Claire's breath caught. A director. Someone with exactly the kind of high-level access Kessler had described earlier. Someone trusted enough to have avoided suspicion for over a decade. "You should have stayed in your quiet little hospital, Miss Doyle," Whitfield said, his eyes shifting toward Claire through the windshield, his voice calm, almost pleasant, in a way that made the words feel far more unsettling than any shout could have. "Daniel made the mistake of trusting you 11 years ago, and it seems old habits die hard for both of you." "You're the source," Claire said, though it was not really a question. "The one Daniel uncovered 11 years ago. A rather old-fashioned word, source," Whitfield said with a faint, humorless smile. "I prefer to think of myself as someone who simply understood, long before anyone else did, that information is the only currency that has ever truly mattered in this world. Daniel found that inconvenient. I'd hoped, after 11 years of silence, that inconvenience had finally resolved itself. Clearly, I was mistaken." "It's over," Kessler said firmly. "Whatever proof Daniel gathered 11 years ago, it's about to surface. Killing us here tonight won't erase that." Whitfield's smile faded slightly. "Perhaps not entirely, but it will buy me enough time to disappear before it does, which, given the circumstances, is really all I require." Claire's mind moved quickly, weighing options, calculating distances, remembering exactly the kind of careful, controlled movements this world had once trained into her, so thoroughly that even now, after years away, they returned to her without hesitation. She glanced toward the transport van behind them, where Daniel and Dr. Hallow waited, vulnerable, exposed, depending entirely on the outcome of the next several seconds. "You're forgetting something, Director," Claire said calmly, opening her door slowly, deliberately, her hands visible just as Whitfield's had been. "Daniel didn't just gather proof 11 years ago, he hid it somewhere only I would understand. Which means, even if something happens to both of us tonight, that proof is still out there, waiting to be found by someone who already knows exactly where to look." Whitfield's expression flickered, just slightly, the first genuine crack in his calm composure. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Claire asked, taking a slow, measured step forward. "You've spent 11 years assuming Daniel's silence meant the danger had passed. But silence isn't the same as forgetting, Director. And trust, once given completely, doesn't simply disappear after a decade apart. It waits, just like the truth has been waiting." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then, from the darkness surrounding the road, quiet shapes began emerging from the tree line. More agents, ones Kessler had apparently positioned in advance, anticipating exactly this kind of confrontation. Whitfield's eyes widened slightly as he realized, too late, that his own confidence in 11 years of undetected control had blinded him to the possibility that Kessler, too, had learned to prepare for contingencies he had not accounted for. "You won't get out of this quietly," Kessler said, stepping out of the vehicle to stand beside Claire. "Not anymore." Whitfield's shoulders sagged slightly, the calm composure finally giving way to something far more human, something closer to exhausted resignation. 11 years, he murmured quietly, almost to himself. 11 years, and it still comes down to a nurse, and a man who couldn't simply stay hidden. The agents closed in quickly, and within minutes, Whitfield was secured, his calm mask replaced entirely by silence as he was led away toward a waiting vehicle. Kessler exhaled slowly, turning to Claire with an expression of genuine, exhausted relief. That was either extremely brave or extremely reckless, she said. Probably both, Claire admitted, allowing herself, finally, a small, tired smile. They returned to the transport van, where Daniel, pale but alert, listened as Claire recounted what had happened, his expression shifting slowly from tense worry to quiet, grateful relief. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Confronting him directly like that, you could have been killed. I didn't have much of a choice, Claire said, taking his hand gently. I already spent 11 years wondering what happened to you, Daniel. I wasn't about to spend 11 more. 3 weeks later, Claire returned to Linmore General Hospital, stepping back into the familiar rhythm of the ICU, as though nothing had changed, though of course, everything had. Nora greeted her with a fierce hug, and 100 questions Claire gently deflected with promises to explain everything over coffee sometime soon. Though privately she suspected some details would remain hers alone to carry. Dr. Hallow, recovering from his own unexpected adventure, welcomed her back with quiet respect, their working relationship settling into something even steadier than before, built now on a foundation of trust that had been tested and had not broken. Daniel Ashworth, recovering steadily at the secure facility, sent word through Kessler that the proof he had hidden all those years ago had finally been recovered and delivered safely into trustworthy hands, exactly where it needed to be. Director Whitfield's network, it turned out, extended further than anyone had initially suspected, and untangling it would take months, possibly years, but it had begun, finally, after 11 long years of silence. Claire stood at the nurse's station late one quiet evening, checking a patient's chart with the same calm, steady focus she always had, indistinguishable to anyone watching from the quiet nurse she had always appeared to be. But she knew now, in a way she hadn't fully understood before, that black helicopter had touched down on the hospital roof, that quiet did not mean empty, and unnoticed did not mean unimportant. Somewhere out there, Daniel was healing, slowly rebuilding a life he had been forced to abandon 11 years earlier, and Claire found herself looking forward, for the first time in a very long while, to whatever came next, whether that meant a quiet return to her ordinary hospital shifts, or something else entirely, something neither of them had quite figured out yet. For now, though, she simply finished her rounds, checked one last monitor, and walked calmly back toward the break room, the same quiet nurse nobody had ever truly noticed, carrying within her, as she always had, far more strength and history than anyone around her had ever guessed.